Okay, everyone. Welcome back to the final session here at Fusco Hall on Jay on the Beach. First, I'm going to be the hype man. Has everyone had a good time at Jay on the Beach? The reaction from the crowd at the end of the conference. That's pretty good. So, just to introduce my panel today, we've got Rebecca Taft, Joe Armstrong, Cassandra Leung, and Mario Fusco. So we're just going to be kind of having quite a general conversation. So to start off, I'm kind of interested in talking about a little bit about the relationship between how you test your code and writing documentation. I don't know if anybody, maybe Mario, if you start us off, if you had a good example of where you had to pick between doing some testing versus documenting a particular project.
Yeah, I work on Rules, which is the rule engine of Red Hat, of JBoss. And so I can speak about my project. I don't think that that test can replace documentation or they are interchangeable. They have different purposes, of course. Yes, you can write, of course, code that also documents the behavior of your software, but if you are doing a framework, if you are doing something that is supposed to be of general use, and also I do a rule engine, which is not a so common piece of software. It involves something very specific that is not very common. So there is a lot of semantic gap that has to be filled between the general knowledge of a developer and how a rule engine actually works, and you cannot do this with just test. I mean, of course you need test. To fellow developer, you can say, okay, the behavior of the rule engine in this particular situation is defined by this test code. You can see how the test code to test work what it does in this situation. But of course, this is not a replacement for documentation. And we are pushed to write a lot of the documentation in Red Hat. And I am, and other people working with me, we are particularly bad in writing code documentation. It's a very pain point. It's very difficult to communicate something, because when you want to communicate something, you also have to find a compelling example, and it's very hard to find them in some situations. So, yeah, writing documentation is a totally different skill than writing software, or at least this is my perception, and it's very hard for me. So, if somebody else has suggestion about this.
I don't know, Cassandra, if you have sort of any tips for developers in writing good documentation, or any examples in your career where you sort of worked on documentation for developers.
So I am a tester, so testing is what I do, so I would always advocate for testing. So if you're talking about documentation testing specifically for developers, then I think there are a lot of options. We kind of touched on it slightly in terms of, tests can form part of the documentation. There's of course always the argument that if you write your code in a clear and understandable way, the code in itself should be good documentation, plus a few sparse, well-placed comments, things like that. But if there's also, I think that kind of thing is more applicable to automated tests or automated checks, as we would say. Ask me about that later at your own risk. But when you look at things like non-automated exploratory testing, for example, there is almost sort of a documentation template that I came up with myself, actually, because I was having this thing of, do I want to spend my time actually testing, or documenting a bunch of stuff about this legacy system. So this document that I came up with, how it's supposed to work, basically tries to streamline that and make it more efficient, so that this how it's supposed to work document will tell you what on earth the system is supposed to do, and also provide you with some examples, hints, and warnings for things that would be in your best interest to test in the future. And that also works the other way around as well for older systems that have not been previously documented. As you do your exploratory tests and as you discover those things, that can be part of your test session. You can, at the same time as you're discovering, document that for future reference. And that way it can not only be useful for developers and testers, but product owners, support team, various other people within the business.
Great. I was wondering, Joe, if you could sort of expand on that a bit and talk about documentation and testing, especially in terms of systems like you're capable of building with Erlang, where you can sort of hot reload code and sort of very much change the system on the fly. How do you feel that sort of relates to the testing and documentation attention?
Not at all. No, I don't think there's any difference to the sort of project. As regards documentation, I think I just relate my own experience with it. The first version of Erlang had no documentation at all. Zero. And we used to tell people, you don't want to understand how the program works, just read the code. And that's to be understood in the early stages of projects. But there's no any specification of what we were doing, so we were just writing code to see what happened. And then, in order to use the system, they can't understand it by reading the code. It's very, very difficult. So we start writing some documentation. And then they say, well, hang on, the documentation and what the code do are completely different. The documentation says it's doing this and the code does something different. Which one is correct? And we would say, the code is correct and the documentation is wrong. So please tell us about that difference and fix up the documentation. Then we got to a point where we thought, now, after maybe 4 or 5 years, we got to the point where we thought, now we actually understand what we're doing. So we'll now change strategy. We'll say if the documentation and the code differ, the documentation is correct and the code is wrong. And then we said, I'll sit down and write what the bloody system is supposed to do. If we sat down and wrote it, it's supposed to do this. And then if the code didn't do that, we fixed up the code. The other thing is I try to encourage people to write documentation. And my personal experience was I found out after a few years of programming, I recognised that I found out I was okay with programming. I could write programs pretty easily. And I was really bad at writing documentation, absolutely rubbish. I mean, my English at school was terrible. I was good at maths and physics, and really, really bad at English, and got very low grades and just couldn't write. And I started writing documentation, and people read it, and it was rubbish. There's stuff I used to write. And then I wrote a book, and had an editor that helped me write that, and I wrote another book, and I still didn't think I could write. And this process of learning to write took about 20 years. And at the end of the 20-year period, I published a PhD thesis and 3 books, and I thought, hey, I know how to write now. And I think, a lot of programmers, they're very good at writing code, and they're not good at writing documentation. And they're shy off doing it. And I think they need help. I think when I started writing books, I had a proofreader and an editor and all these people who helped, and that was fantastic. And I remember working with Pragmatic Press, and I said, but I can't spell, and they said, we hire people who can spell, you don't have to spell. And some of the best advice I've had is, or the project is, hire a technical author. Because the project teams don't like writing documentation. And in fact, that book I recommended this morning, The Mythical Man Month, in that Brooks highlighted what he thought the ideal team was. And an ideal team should have like a dozen people. It should have a technical author, it should have a librarian, it should have a systems guy who fixes up the libraries and makes sure that works. It should have a couple of domain specialists who understand the problem. Then it should have a couple of sort of programmers who are technical guys who write the code. And that sort of team, where you've got a technical author and an editor and a project manager and some testers and some lead programmers and some domain experts, is a very good way to work.
So Rebecca, I don't know if you have any sort of tips or experience from your career in getting developers to write better documentation.
Sure. Is this working? Yeah. So I spent the last 5 years in academia and recently rejoined industry about 6 months ago at Cockroach Labs. And Cockroach DB is all open source, so we as developers are encouraged to try to write code and write comments that is clear enough that anybody looking at the code can understand what it's trying to do, not just somebody who already works at Cockroach Labs. We actually have a documentation team that's responsible for writing front-end documentation, which is great. I definitely recommend checking out the docs for Cockroach DB if you're interested in using it. It's fabulous. But I think there's different levels of documentation. So there's the front-end user documentation, which is what our docs team works on. Then we have the comments within the code, which is what we as developers try to make as clear as possible. And of course, there's going to be some well-placed inline comments, but for every function and every file, we try to write a good several paragraphs explaining what the file is for and what you'll find inside. And then of course, tests are also kind of a form of documentation. That is kind of in some ways the source of truth. It's saying what the system actually does, maybe not exactly what it should be doing, but it tells you what it does. And then there's other forms of documentation, like at Cockroach Labs, we, for larger features, we write RFCs, requests for comment. I think that's comment from other companies as well. It's basically kind of a proposal about what the feature is planning to do and the problem it's trying to solve, and it includes some of the technical details as well. And that's sort of a way for the team to kind of iterate on the design before the feature is actually built. But then once that's done, and once the feature is in progress and finished, that can also serve as a form of documentation for somebody who wants to go back and learn about what that feature is supposed to do. So yeah, that's my experience at Cockroach.
So if I can open it up to the whole panel, I think sort of the thesis is that it's very project specific, kind of where to go with how much testing you do, and even who you're writing the documentation for. Has anyone on the panel got any examples of projects where it went wrong, and potentially what can happen if you sort of pick the wrong angle for testing the documentation?
A project that went wrong because of documentation?
Yeah, or potentially it was missing testing, missing documentation, or even the wrong sort of testing, the wrong sort of documentation.
Well, in my experience, what I saw is that if something is not documented, it doesn't exist. So probably the fact the experience that I can report transmit is that it happened in the past that we developed some very cool feature. We hoped that people using drones started adopting it quickly, and we saw that it was happening, and then we forgot to document it. So yeah, if something is not documented, it doesn't exist. So it has to be there in some form. And the other thing is that to follow up to Joe's suggestion of having a team of technical writers, we have them. We have a few of them. Maybe we should have more. The problem is that even there you may have misunderstanding between the developers and the technical writers. So what it happens is that I write a first draft of the documentation, then the technical writer review it, change a bit the sentence, but sometimes it happens that changing the sentence also change the sense change the sense of the meaning of the sentence, and we end up with a documentation that says the opposite of what the software does, but just because of this misunderstanding. So, yeah, it's a difficult field, yeah.
Go for it.
I think you definitely made a great point there. There's that thing of degrees of separation and sort of removal from the original source. So if we sort of outsource all the documentation, if you will, as you say, it is so easy to misunderstand, maybe go on the other side of something that seemed ambiguous, or just to generally not have enough knowledge to appreciate that really is, you know, that's what you meant and it wasn't a mistake. To kind of try and answer your question of things that maybe go wrong, I think probably going on either side of the extremes is probably something that I would warn against. So I've seen examples of people saying, you know, oh, we're agile, we're lean, you know, let's get rid of all the documentation, we don't need it. And then of course, you know, you get the same questions, same misunderstandings coming up again and again because there's not enough documentation. But on the other side of that, it can be, you know, oh, we have to document everything. Why? What do we need it for? Just because we have to, that's our process, that's what we do. So you spend ages writing, you know, this however long document that no one ever reads in the first place. So I would always encourage more of a pragmatic approach. Obviously I'm biased, but I would always say, you know, testing, you know, through testing we discover, as you know, Rebecca mentioned earlier, what it is that the system and the software actually does. So if you spend all your time talking about what you hope for it to do and you don't make the effort to find out if that expectation is actually met, then there's risk there. So I always think about risk and, you know, the practical approach. If you're going to be pushed for time and you have to choose one or the other, and there's no other option, I would say go for testing, but then also have as much documentation as it makes sense to have and reduce the waste.
Hello. Yeah, the biggest mistake I think was when we did the industrialization of airline, that we didn't have a documentation system in place before we started coding, because we were going to write all this code, and really we would like to have written the documentation before we wrote the code. We didn't have a system, so we went down and talked to some people there. You know, Ericsson produced millions of pages of documentation, thousands of manuals, and talk to these guys, and they say, you know, documentation, you need to build a documentation system. You don't need to build one or two markdown, you know, one or two things written in markdown is not a system. It's not maintainable. And so I put myself in charge of doing that as the most acute problem when we started. And just quickly decided, you know, made a very quick decision to define the directory structure where we put all the documents so we knew where to put them, and we just do everything in XML. So we just wrote all in XML, and you know, we were producing like 15 manuals and 14,000 pages of documentation, all produced from XML, and we could do user manuals and reports and man pages and all sorts of things. So I mean, just don't use Markdown or anything. I don't. There might be an alternative to XML. I don't know. And don't use DocBook and things like that to you know, hand roll your own one for your explicit needs. It's actually quite easy to turn XML into HTML or LaTeX or PDF, or it's just a bit of code that does it. It's quite simple.
I don't really have an example of where a project failed because of lack of documentation, but I kind of tell you the flip side of my first project at Cockroach DB was supposed to be kind of an intro-friendly project. I was supposed to implement this SQL feature called select for update. I don't know, anybody used that feature before in other databases? A couple people, yeah. So it's a little bit of an obscure feature. It basically allows you to lock a row in the database using a simple read query, which normally wouldn't create a write lock on a row. And I was supposed to implement this in Cockroach, so I started implementing this, and somebody was like, maybe you should write an RFC. So RFC is this document that kind of outlines the design of a feature. And so I wrote this whole document. This was my second week on the job. And then all of a sudden, all of these engineers at Cockroach started commenting about all of the potential pitfalls of implementing this feature in Cockroach DB because of the particular transaction model of Cockroach. It wouldn't behave how a user would expect. And after 3 weeks of going back and forth, we decided not to implement this feature at all. And I think everybody felt terrible because this was supposed to be a friendly kind of introductory project for me, and it turned out to not be that at all. But on the flip side, it's better that we went through that process of documenting the design without having to go through the pain of implementing it and realizing that this was not a good idea after all.
But to make one more comment, this is a different type of documentation. It's not documentation for the users, and it's not really to help the programmers. And that's often when I've been researching how to solve a problem. I've had to Google a lot. I've found lots of PDF files and things like that, and I saved them all. I always save them all together with the code. and I'm appalled, I'm horrified when I go to, people do this, and then they find the solution to their problem. They make a code directory, put it on GitHub, and they throw away all these documents they found that helped them write the code. This is absolutely essential to find it. And so like the RFCs and PDF files you found on the net and little things, just save them as PDFs, stick them in a directory. And I have a subdirectory originally just called research, and that research directory can have 20 or 30 PDF files in, and the code might have 10 lines of code in. I had to examine 20 or 30 documents to find out how to write 10 lines of code. Do not throw that stuff away. Can you believe it? I don't know why do people throw it away? It's crazy.
Sorry. So I'd like to sort of ask a slightly contentious question to the panel, if anyone wants to pick up on it. So maybe it's not contentious, but we've talked about testing and documentation, and I think that going through that process can sort of feed back into the loop of even how you build your data structures, even how you structure your programs. The contentious question is, how do you sort of get out of that loop in a way? There's a lot of thinking involved. So how do you, where do you start with that? Do you start with the code? Do you start with the documentation? Where do you start?
You sort of do both. Well, you interleave between. I mean, often if when you describe an algorithm, you find that description is horribly difficult. You think, wait a minute, I'll just change the I mean, we don't, in the old days, these waterfall model and so start with a specification. These guys who specify, and they sort of hand it over to the coders and they code it according to the specification. These days, they don't work like that. They do a sort of vague description of the problem, and write it and try and document, hang on, this just doesn't make sense. Well, maybe if we solve a slightly different problem, go back to the formulated problem. Is it okay if we just change the problem and do this instead? And they say, fine, because the description is really easy. So, I mean, if you can't describe it in clear text, it's a very good sign the algorithms are wrong.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, waterfall, that's one of the first things I thought of when you said, what should you do first, documentation or writing the code. That to me does feel very, let's do this entire thing, then pass it over, which I'm sure we all know to different degrees that it's not the best idea. So again, just coming back to practical approach, what is the first thing you would have to start with? I would say it's a conversation. Don't jump into writing anything until you've actually spoken to key people, whether that be the product owner, developers, users. Have conversations with the important people involved. Get feedback. Certainly in testing, we're always talking about shorten feedback loops. Get quick feedback, fail fast. So I think what would make sense is to have those conversations, sketch out some diagrams, put together some prototypes, have a little bit of feel, do a proof of concept or something, just all about getting that feedback, find out, are you on the right track in the first place, and don't go down this big long road only to discover that it was always going to the wrong place or wrong materials or whatever. Again, just be practical.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to follow up on that, as part of this RFC process at Cockroach, I think some people think they need to write out this entire thesis before they start writing code. At some point we had the discussion, no, actually you can do a prototype, a proof of concept kind of at the same time as you're writing this document, because it'll also inform what you're writing in the document. And of course that first proof of concept, all of that code is probably just going to get thrown away, but it's kind of a learning iterative process so that by the time you actually start writing the production code, you have a better sense of what you're trying to accomplish.
I would echo that. There's a misconception about writing and coding that you need to know what you're doing before you start. You should think about it. But in fact, that process of writing causes you to solve. I mean, you actually solve the problem while you're doing the writing. If you didn't know what you were doing when you started and start writing, it clarifies in front of you. And,
it depends on the task, of course, but yeah, there are some tasks. For instance, again, on my example of doing that, you do lots of ground research, you don't know in advance.
You don't
know what are you doing, because otherwise we wouldn't call it research. So.
I used to say to my boss, you've done this whole problem. I'd say, I've solved it. And you say, so what's the solution? I say, I can't explain it to you. It hasn't moved from the verbal, it hasn't moved to the verbal part of my brain. I'm still struggling for the words to do it. But I've got this feeling I've solved it. Trust your intuition. And talk to me. And you find a domain expert and you all exactly it's the same question. What is the most difficult problem? You know, you put something wide problem, what's the most difficult specific problem? And they say, yes, it's. Then you go away and write a little prototype, solve the most difficult problem, and then you say, what's the next most difficult problem? And then you get to the point where you think, from then on, all the sub-problems are trivial. So then you can do the project. But if you get a stop on one of those difficult bits, that's the time to call the project off. You should not proceed. And you should do that in a small group. You shouldn't expand into a big group until all the difficult problems have been solved. And you should do that in a small group.
When you're solving problems as well, I think that it is important to experiment and try at things.
Yeah.
As you say, you don't always know exactly where you're going or what exactly you're trying to do when you start. So again, you know, a conversation that's often had in testing is around, you know, test scripts and test cases. You know, write out all the steps that you're going to do before you do them. It's like, how am I going to know what steps I'm going to do? Because the system needs to respond and I need to react to that. So if I don't touch the system, you know, if I need to write all this stuff first, how will I know? And that's how you get, you know, not so great work, in my opinion. So there has to be a level of flexibility in doing just what makes sense. And I think sometimes that will be down to the individual as well. You know, some people will be best when they just, you know, get to the laptop and start typing away, writing. Other people really like to visualize things, do models, you know, go up to the whiteboard and do a bunch of stuff. Other people hate whiteboards, you don't want to go near them. So I think it is a personal process as well to a degree. And if you try and, you know, pick one thing and get it, you know, standardized across everyone, I think that can be really damaging to the creativity of the team and then ultimately, you know, the value and the kind of success that you're going to have.
Anything to add on that front, Rebecca?
No, I definitely agree with everything.
Well, the other thing I was going to say is, you know, resistant project managers ask silly questions like, how long is this going to take? And you must say, I don't know, I haven't done it before. You know, you just sit there and ridiculous questions. They ask all the time. I know the younger programmers will say they're frightened by project managers, so they'll answer like 3 weeks. Old programmers have been doing it for us, I haven't a clue, I haven't done it before. So, you know, just as a group of programmers, refuse to give time estimates for stuff you've never done before. You can estimate it if you've done it before, that's fine. If you haven't done it before, don't give a time estimate.
I think it's really interesting to take that and just kind of ask a further question, which is obviously Scrum and Agile are in some way catering to not knowing what's going to happen for a long period of time, and they at least give you the flexibility to change. Hopefully it's not a contentious thing to say that it's a thing people are doing, but whether it's a good thing or not, I'm not sure. But sort of, where do you see sort of the software engineering and project management side moving in the future? Obviously we've gone from the waterfall model through to more agile techniques. So where do we go from here? Where do you see it moving to? Crystal balls are ready.
Well, I can tell you what we're doing at Cockroach and what I've seen in other companies. I can't really speak to the industry as a whole, but what I found that has worked for us at Cockroach, we're not really doing Agile or Scrum. We sort of have, I guess, monthly milestones where we kind of have a body of work that we're trying to, you know, finish over the next 4 or 5 weeks, and then after that we have, you know, a meeting to talk about what we're going to do next. And the Cockroach release cycle is 6 months, but on the Query Optimizer team, which is my team now, we try to kind of break that up into monthly chunks. And I think that's good because we've sort of taken the approach of kind of breadth over depth, because we're trying to basically replicate all of the functionality that's already working in CockroachDB's existing heuristic planner and put that into a cost-based optimizer. So it's a lot of work that we're trying to do in a short period of time. So we've sort of, each new milestone kind of been having a different focus, which has allowed us to, you know, not go down some rabbit hole for weeks at a time without kind of reassessing and starting on a new path every few weeks.
So basically, repeat what I've already said in terms of being practical and experimenting and stuff. I think things like agile and scrum, they're like methodologies, frameworks, ways of thinking. But I think that a lot of people, maybe sometimes more the business side or the higher ups, the kind of people who like buzzwords, they take these things and you think, oh great, this is the next new thing, this is what everyone's doing, and of course we're forward thinking and we're innovative, so we have to do that as well, and we need to tell everyone that we're doing that. And then so people get really caught up in following these things, which, don't get me wrong, they have good points and bad points like everything else, but they were built by specific people in a specific context, which is never going to match exactly your situation, your company, environment, etc. So it kind of reminds me of, I think there's like a Japanese philosophy or something, Hashira, which is essentially translates to follow the rules, be the rules, break the rules. So I think things like Agile and Scrum, it's a good starting point, it's a good guidance for people who just don't know what they're doing, they don't know where to start, they want to find their way, and they just want to try something. So I think that those kind of things, follow them to a point, and if you find that actually this is working really well for us, we don't need to make any changes, which I would be surprised at, but great, fine. But also recognise that this was not custom made for you, obviously. So don't feel like you have to stick to it. If you really are that forward thinking and innovative, then take it, use it, and then realise how you can fix and improve it to fit your own context and to really make you the front of your industry or your field. Specifically about estimates that you're talking about before. I know there is like a no estimates movement, and I can understand why people don't like them. I do have more of a business background, so I can understand why people would ask for them. But what I would say, it's not always a trick question. I do think some people use them for evil in terms of you take an estimate and turn it into a promise. But sometimes, when I was product owner, I would just ask because I genuinely had no idea. I would have some feature or whatever in my head, and I would not know how long it would take. And maybe a developer would say to me, "Oh, that will take about 2 days." And I say, "Oh, really? That's really fast. Fair enough. Great." Or someone would say, "Oh, that's probably going to take at least 4 weeks to know what we're doing." I'd say, "Oh, okay, fair enough. Let me plan for that." So it's not always a terrible thing, although yes, it's very difficult. An idea that I've had lately that I've not been able to really try out in the real world is to, instead of using time estimates or story points, but to use Cynefin instead. So when you really have no idea what you're doing at all, maybe be like chaos or complex, and then as you do more research, do some experimentation, find out what you're doing, you can sort of break it down into complicated, simple, etc. I've not tried it out yet, but maybe that would be nicer, or I don't know.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, that the agile community should learn to adopt agile methodologies in a more agile way, meaning in a more flexible way. I see that these methodologies sometimes are adopted like a dogma without questioning, without understanding if they are the good fit for your development team, and often they are. Often they don't work for a specific team or for a specific person. I have a very I don't know if common example, but anyway, I have another example of my experience. I started working for that 7 years ago now, and we mainly work remotely, I work from home. So the very first time I'm a morning person, so I start working around 8:30. Actually, I read some email. I waste some time reading news on the internet, but actually I start working around 9. And sometimes it happened to me that I start doing my stuff, and sometimes I feel I'm hungry, and I think why I need to eat food? I mean, it's strange. I had my breakfast 2 years ago. 2 hours ago, or why? Sorry, 2 hours ago. I had my breakfast 2 hours ago. It must be 11. Why I need to? Why my stomach is empty? And I looked the clock, and it's actually the 4 p.m. I stayed 6-7 hours in the flow. Okay. And then somebody come to me, oh, you really need to try this Pomodoro technique. It allows you to stay 25 minutes in the flow. And yeah, you know, it doesn't work to me. It doesn't work for me. I mean, I can stay without any problem 6-7 hours in the flow. So why should I do this? Okay? It doesn't work for me. But I'm a pragmatic person. If it works for you, or if there is another technique that works for you and sounds strange to me, it's perfectly fine. I believe that Agile, I'm not a big fan of Agile methodology in general. I believe that half of them is common sense and half of them doesn't make sense at all. So, yeah, I just do what it works for me and for my team. And I think we should be more flexible. They are all great stuff. They are all interesting proposals, but take them with a grain of salt.
Just to come back to something you were saying about sort of the complexity side and trying to break down that complexity. I don't know, would you agree that sort of a lot of the project management techniques are in a way an acceptance of complexity?
Yeah.
So they're sort of evolving from it and they're fed by complexity?
No, not at all. I think management problem is lack of control. They've got all these programmers, especially if they're not programmers themselves, they can wander around. They couldn't, I mean, managers could walk around. They couldn't tell somebody if somebody solved, what Ericsson doing telephony. They couldn't tell by looking at the screen if they're writing a video game or doing a 3GPP protocol. They just couldn't tell. So they need this illusion of control. So they set up deadlines and sort of things. And they also feel the need to manage programmers. I worked as a programmer for 50 years, well, not 50, about 40 years, and I've worked for several different companies, and I can say in projects we've always worked the same way. Every group I've worked in is self-organised. If it's been, 10 people, it realises, those 2 or 3 will work together maybe for a couple of months, and then there's a change a bit.
It depends a lot on the size of the team. I mean, we started as a small team, a 10-person team, and we had some flows or methodologies, and now we are a 60-person team, and what we did for 10-person doesn't
split it into, I think about 10 and 12 is the maximum size. But in all this time, right, from way back, the day was always the same pretty much. You walk into work, and then you sit down, have some coffee, and start talking about the ideas you've had since yesterday or what you're working on. And if you have a coffee break that lasts for an hour, that's 2 hours or something like that, you're talking about the stuff, and then you go, okay, I think we'll go and write some code and see if it works. And maybe did, and you do that every day. There was no need to formalise that with a stand-up meeting or something. That was just providing the illusion that what does a manager see? He sees a load of guys sitting in a room, drawing circles on a blackboard and talking in a language they don't understand and drinking coffee, and are these guys working? No, they're working when they're sitting here doing that. Of course, programming is all about understanding. It's not about typing lines of code into a machine. And this dialogue is essential to understanding. And interrupting it with, okay, now we've got to have a stand-up meeting, and there were 47 errors in Jenkins last night.
I don't know, Rebecca, if I could ask you sort of directly, as developers, we were talking about getting in the flow and sort of spending quite a long time really delving deep into a problem. I'm not sure we could ever get management to understand the buzzwords, Jenkins or IntelliJ or whatever, but do you think it's possible to sort of describe those mental states that the developers have for productivity?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just to follow up on what you were saying about the flow, I think having these forced daily stand-up meetings just totally interrupts that flow. I feel like you should only have essential meetings during the week. I mean, obviously you need to have some meetings to kind of sync all together as a team, but often these kind of informal conversations, you know, in the next to the coffee machine are enough to kind of provide that point of synchronization, and then, you know, maybe you have one meeting during the week where you get, you know, the entire team kind of on board. But I don't know, in terms of explaining this state of flow, I think, yeah, probably most developers will experience this where you just kind of, you know, you are working and you just have no sense of how much time has passed. Yeah.
I must say, I was working on a project in Ericsson, and I was sharing this office with another guy, and we did this, I don't know, it was agile or scrum or something, I don't know. But we had to do it. And then we weren't being agile, so we got off the same. And then I thought, oh, well, I know, we'll do an experiment. So we did an experiment, and that consisted of cleaning the whiteboard, drawing 3 lines on it, and putting lots of yellow post-it notes all over it, and moving them around occasionally. These things didn't say anything, we just moved them occasionally. The manager walked by and looked, well, Joe's new scrum now, or whatever it's called. We didn't actually change the notes, we just moved them occasionally. And then they thought, great, we were doing what we're supposed to do. But it was an experiment to see if they would notice that there was nothing written on these notes. They weren't happy.
But to play devil's advocate for a second, I think it is important to have some point of synchronization, you know, whether it's next to the coffee machine, or I also work remotely, so often that's just kind of direct Slack messages, which I think there's some people on my team that are really good about that, just kind of checking in periodically, because otherwise you can kind of get stuck in your own world and say, you know, I have this problem, but I'm not going to ask anybody about it, I'm just going to fix it myself, because that's going to be more fun. But it's obviously not productive, so I think...
Yeah, we did have release dates, we said in the last we release on this date at this time, and you know, it's got to be ready. And that worked.
Did you have
you
any...
need some structure.
You know, we
some
started
structure.
learning this stuff a week before the exam.
I don't know, do you have any examples of sort of bridging that terminology gap? Coming together and sort of having a product owner role previously in your career, how would you sort of recommend to bridge that buzzword gap between what the developers are doing and what the business people understand?
Well, funnily enough, my talk yesterday was what are you talking about? How others perceive devs and DevOps. So if you weren't there, maybe watch the recording. But essentially, it is about two-way communication, understanding, and empathy. So I must admit, I do have to disagree with what you're saying to an extent regarding, you know, project managers or managers in general just wanting to have control, because as much as you know, developers and other technical people have a difficult job in the business, so do the business people. And as much as they probably, a lot of them, you know, couldn't come and look at what developers are programming and understand what it is, you know, could we really look at, you know, their controlling a business sheets and understand what that is? How well could we do their jobs? So I do think that, you know, if we are being asked these questions, you know, how long is it going to take? What are we doing just now? Why are there all these errors? I think maybe to an extent it's about control, but not control in the sense of I need to manage people, I need to be, you know, the leader of this project. It's just, and sometimes it can be, I'm not sure what's going on, how can I find out what's going on? Well, I'll ask what's going on with these errors. So sometimes my advice would be, if someone keeps asking you about a certain thing, just say, just out of interest, is there like a report or like a meeting that you're using this information for? And they might say, actually no, it's just because I always see them and I don't know what they are. And you can say, oh, well, you know, let's sit down, I'll explain some of these things to you. Or, you know, they might say, well, funny you ask, you know, I just got an email from my manager and she's asking me about this stuff, and, you know, I just thought that might help me. And you might be then able to say, oh, well, that's got nothing to do with that. Let me show you this other thing that will be a lot more useful to you. And so that way, not only are you building a connection and a relationship with someone who might be able to help you in the future, they get the information that they need, and they also stop bothering you with these questions that you don't want to answer. So I think it is really important to have a bit of empathy and just sort of assume good intent from people, and if you're confused about why they're asking something, ask them back.
Okay, so we're just coming to the end. Just to close up, I'd like to ask the panel, sort of in the vein of what we've been talking about, what's your number one software engineering tip or number one product management tip that you could give to people to take home today? Starting with you, Rebecca.
Oh, Does anybody else have an answer ready to go?
Maybe you, Mario?
As a this is not about methodology or about documentation. My biggest tip, more important tip, is not focus on a single language or on a single technology. Languages and framework and they are just two. They are the hammers and the screwdrivers in your toolbox. So the biggest is your toolbox, the better it is. You need different sizes of hammers and different kinds of screwdriver to do your job done and use the right tool for the right for the problem at hand. So make your toolbox as big as possible. This is my suggestion.
I can add something now. So I spent the last 5 years in my PhD program, and in the PhD it's very solitary, and you work out all these problems on your own, and maybe you meet your advisor once a week or once a month or something, but you're really on your own. Whereas working as part of a team, you're not on your own, and I think it's important to remember that. I think my first couple of months at Cockroach, I was so tempted to always just try to figure out things for myself, and it's just much slower that way. So, maybe don't just give up immediately, try to figure it out for yourself, but don't spend more than an hour working on something without asking a question. I think that would be my tip.
I guess my tip would be based on the view that all tech problems are people problems. Like if you think about any product or solution or wherever that you're building, you might say, oh yeah, but the company just wants to make money. But they can't make money without solving some sort of problem for people or addressing some sort of need for people. So my tip would be to talk to people, understand, the solutions that you're providing, the needs that you're addressing, and always just keep that in mind. Don't worry that thinking and talking to people means that you have to be a people person and talk to people all the time. I'm actually very introverted, so I find that very tiring and exhausting. But trust me, it's a lot worse if you close yourself off all the time and never make an effort to engage with anyone. And as Rebecca said as well, it doesn't help you to do that. And work as a team, do things together. And same thing as Mario said as well. It's not always about the tools, the processes, the methodologies. Think about why you're doing stuff.
I think ask questions actually. I noticed when I was a young student that I took a PhD in physics and sit there, and I noticed the speaker would go like that, and then the young PhD students, they would ask very smart questions. And the old professors there, about my age now, they would go, excuse me, young man, I didn't really understand that at all. Could you explain? And all the other people in the audience went, oh, thank God they asked that question. I didn't really understand why the young... Well, I did understand, because when I was young, I didn't behave like that. As I became older, I just asked more and more stupid questions. And I love it when young people ask really stupid questions. There is no question that is stupid enough that it cannot be asked. Ask those stupid questions all the time. And don't take no for an answer and and when you get an answer, say, sorry, I didn't understand that. Can you simplify it even more? and then don't leave people who, if you find somebody who's an expert, and you say, sorry, I don't understand this stuff, could you explain it to me? And you don't understand their explanation. And I say, could you simplify that explanation for me? And if they can't, they're not an expert. But don't believe in experts. Don't understand how it works. And somebody who really understands something will peel all these layers off, layer by layer by layer, until you understand it, and will help you understand it. But they need to know what you know. And I help everybody. I just need to know where to start. Are you advanced? Are you beginner? I'll help you. Ask loads of questions. Ask really stupid questions.
So thank you very much for the panel.